Alright, so yeah, just going to be doing a bit of a weekly sort of review of the charts and the price action. Going to be covering euro dollar, gold, Aussie dollar, and also sterling yen. So yeah, enjoy. Um, so we're kind of sort of seeing almost a little bit of a sort of head and shoulders or inverted head and shoulders pattern sort of playing out here at the moment. You're starting to see a little bit of resistance around this point here, which is kind of like a sort of 3-point sort of confluence on that. So we've got this zone sort of cutting through, which if you zoom back and that, this has sort of been some previous strong points of support for price and that to sort of move right up. So obviously sort of it's going to take a couple of times, and obviously being support now it's resistance. It's going to take a couple of times to sort of get through. So I think prices can go through in one move, but most likely you're going to see a little bit of a pushback. At the same time, you've got this sort of falling resistance just coming down through here. So obviously this has been tested a couple of times, and sort of price has sort of been rejected from it over and over in that. So again, we're seeing that. Plus, for a third sort of confluence, you've got this sort of 23 fib line sort of from this sort of whole move down here. So you can see prices sort of definitely sort of been rejected a couple of times. So the sort of the sellers are trying to say at the moment, look, we're not quite ready for price to push through here. So sort of the theme sort of seems with a couple of these pairs at the moment that we're going to be seeing some USD strength sort of coming through early week. Not to sort of say that it's going to be an overwhelming amount, but it's definitely feeling like there's a little bit of a change in sentiment in the market. If we sort of zoom in a little bit more with this on here, so if we put it onto the 4 hour, you can kind of really see that price is forming a little bit of a sort of range through this bit here. So you've got the buyers, you've got the sellers, and that both sort of like tussling about sort of who's going to sort of come out on top. But if you look at it and actually examine the price action, you're seeing these highs coming in here and here and here and here. They're all coming in just a little bit lower each time. So the bulls are just wearing out a little bit on each push north, which makes me sort of think that you're probably going to see a little bit of a push back down to the lower side here. So when you're looking for the sort of entry, like ultimately it feels like there's a bit of a shift. It looks like price action is sort of coming up, like it wants to sort of regain a little bit more of a overall upward momentum sort of feel for the market, but I would say it's not quite ready to look for buyers quite yet. So I mean, if we sort of look, you could probably almost sort of zoom this up here and put another zone through the middle here. Not as strong. I mean, as you say, you've got this sort of left shoulder sort of pivot point down over here. Prices underneath, bouncing around here. So it's been sort of respected a couple of times, but of course there's higher zone here as well. So that's a point of interest as well. But if we were looking for buys here, I would probably sort of drag a fib up over this. And if we sort of have a look a little bit closer, I mean, we're seeing the 61 fib line marry up almost perfectly with that other shoulder. The 50 coming in very close to this point here as well. So these are the two areas of interest that I'd be looking for buys. So the 51 and sorry, the 50 and the yeah. So yeah, basically, sort of if we're looking for these 2 points here, we're going to see sort of price come back down. It's going to find support at some point through here to have another attempt up to really sort of see if the bulls are sort of back in charge, or if the sort of bears are going to really sort of maintain control. So once we're coming back here, we're going to be looking for buyers around the 50. Probably I'd say the 61 looks like it sort of suits a little bit better. And then as it sort of comes through the sort of falling resistance, that's one of these resistance points out of the way. So you're not tackling all three of them at once. You get rid of this sort of falling resistance earlier on, coming through here. You've already tagged the main sort of 23 fib on this big move coming back here. So first tag of that, well, 2 tags here if you zoom right in, but really You got your two tags there coming through, so that'll be a third attempt to sort of push through there. So that again sort of works for the bull's favour. And also you've got a second attempt of coming through this horizontal. So I would say sort of probably what you'd be looking for entries here would be sort of coming back down to say either the 50 or the 68, 61, but 61s tend to sort of be a little bit more reliant, and obviously that just gives you an extra bit of swing. And then sort of coming through, you're through your falling resistance, you're coming up here, you're tagging this zone again, we look to push through, come back down, retest, and then on its way. So I think definitely sort of you're seeing a bit of a sort of change in the sort of sentiment of the market, but I mean it's not going to happen overnight, but I'd say definitely I'd be looking for buys, not quite yet, but probably down around this 1.1562 sort of area. I mean, these moves have just been just unbelievable. I mean, if you're looking at this from a low to a high here, looking at what, there's 800 points. I mean, that was back on start of the month. So basically two weeks in a fortnight, 800 point move. I mean, GJ always moves quickly. That's one of the best and most appealing things about the pair is that sort of like if you get on the right side of it, you know, an average hour, you know, they can move 100 points, and it doesn't even need to be news driven. It can just be sort of, you know, just a nice sort of general trend following move, and it'll just sort of keep on going. But the yen has just been so pathetically weak. All the pairs against the yen that have just exploded. CAD, JPY, even Aussie, JPY. I mean, if you look at the sort of the dollar yen, that's just astounding. Even while the sort of the USD is getting hammered, you know, you're still seeing UJ just explode north. But like everything, it's got to come to an end at some point. I mean, this isn't just going to keep on going and going. Except, you know, maybe people were saying it around here, around the 154. I certainly had a couple of long positions around this zone here, and you know, took my piece of the pie and that. But really, if I just sort of bought and sat on my hands, gone away for a week, and that it would have worked out a lot better. But of course, that's hindsight trading, isn't it? So really, I mean, you've taken out these previous highs here, and it's still going. So it's really just, I mean, the bulls are just completely in charge at the moment. Like, there's no two questions about it. It's just they're really sort of taking this one to town. But again, like all good moves, you're going to have these sort of pullbacks, these retracements, even in a healthy move. Even if this wanted to, you know, eventually move to 160, you're going to get a pullback. This kind of stuff is not sustainable on this direction. So looking for a bit of an entry, if we were to try and sort of look to get long on this, like, we're not going to buy it on the market because, you know, it's just, you're asking to buy the top if you're doing something like this. So grab the fib out, drag it up over the thing. You know, this is given that this point here is the actual top, but it's not to sort of say it is yet. But, you know, for, you know, the sort of point of this at the moment, we're going to say that yes, okay, it has reached the top. And I mean, if you zoom in a little bit on this one, if you look at the 4 hour, you are seeing this sort of rolling over. But again, it's the end of the week, so you can't really sort of judge too much. I mean, certainly price, the wicks on the bottom of these 4 hours are saying that there's still some buyers there. So this isn't by any means on a downward trend at the moment. But I mean, if you look at those sort of things, you go, okay, well, where am I going to sort of try and get long on this? I don't want to buy the top. You could look at these previous highs. That's always a good sort of position to sort of like look for a retest there. But realistically, I'd probably be looking at the fibs a little bit more. Now, 61 fibs are great, but you know, you're not, most likely at the moment, you're not going to see, what's that, a sort of 500 point pullback. I mean, the thing's moved 800 points, so who knows, anything's possible, but I would say probably not at the moment, unless the market goes extremely sort of risk off. So you'd probably be looking maybe around the 38 would be great. Previous highs, as we mentioned before, around 156. It's a nice round number. That was the previous highs, so that could also be a good point to sort of look to get long. But I would probably say you'd probably get a bit more of an overshoot of that. Like, this has been such a big, strong move. it's just not sustainable with that sort of degree that it's moving up on. If we sort of try to sort of make some sort of point of a sort of trend on this, you know, that's just, it's not a healthy angle for it to be moving on. So say that we wanted to sort of say, okay, yes, look, it's forming a channel. You know, I don't like these big empty areas over here when you're looking for channels. You want something that's a little bit tighter. So you'd be looking maybe sort of, I mean, that's not to sort of say that it can't work something like this. I mean, obviously the price has been respected a couple of times here, and then it's sort of broken through. So if we do break this 157.40 mark, you're going to be looking possibly up around, I mean, obviously the speed of which it sort of comes up, but you are looking realistically probably another sort of 150, 200 points to the top side here. But as I said, sort of like with a couple of the pairs, I'm sort of seeing a little bit of a shift and things. I think USD is going to start to get a little bit of strength back come early week. That will sort of take away from a bit of the sterling strength. Obviously, sort of like, you know, JPY is a safe haven. So if the market does move to a bit more of a risk-off sort of attitude, which I've sort of pointed out with a couple of the other pairs, particularly like the euro dollar and the Aussie dollar as well, they're going to see a little bit of a sort of more safe haven, bit of profit taking, bit of risk-off attitude early in the week, which would sort of go, okay, yep, so, you know, give this a bit of a time to sort of cool off and come back down here. I mean, if you've got the 23 fib line, this lines up with this kind of area where it did have some support recently, albeit, I mean, a small little part. I mean, it's not like these sort of big sort of pivot points that we've seen previously, but I would say sort of definitely a bit of a risk-off attitude early in the week. You're going to see price sort of move a little bit further back down this way. Again, it's all dependent on the speed in which it sort of comes down. I mean, maybe it comes back down and tests the trend. I mean, that would sort of line up perfectly with those sort of lower points. But I would say probably around this zone over here, you might sort of get them push it just down underneath these lows here, because that would be a great spot to put your stops. So if they want to come down and hunt for some stops, I would say they're probably going to put it down there. So we just see back down here, I mean, you get that previous high from around the 155. You've got, it's around number 155, almost 155.02 where it is there, but, you know, splitting hairs, you're pretty much looking at 155, so nice round number. Get a bit of an overshoot, 36 points, and, you know, put your stop losses down here, they'll run down here. Gives it a chance to sort of retest this channel, this rising support that's sort of come up here, and then sort of look for another point. So I'd probably be looking, I wouldn't be buying this at this stage. As I said, I think a bit of early sort of risk-off attitude in the week. Bit of profit taking in that will sort of bring the price down, look for the stops, get underneath here, and then look to sort of get long around this point here, and then look for a little bit of a bounce up. First of all, to retest those highs, and then to really sort of see what the market wants to do from there. It does feel like there's a bit of a shift in the market and the whole sort of sentiment, but we've really got to sort of see. But definitely I wouldn't be buying longs at this stage. You know, it's hard to sort of say to short it as well. Really comes down to your trading style, but if you stand in front of a freight train, you got to be prepared to be flattened. So I definitely would be using half risk, if that. But yeah, if that suits your style, that's great. But it's a pretty daunting thing, and you just got to be prepared that, look, you know what, it's like picking the bottom. It's exactly the same, but you're trying to pick the top and trying to get the shorts on there. So I would definitely say bulls obviously in charge here, so I'd be looking for longs, but I'd be looking for longs at a healthier position, probably around that 155 point, and then sort of get them to sort of push up and retest those highs. 157, you're looking at a 200 point move there. But yeah, that's where I'd be looking now. That's cool. So just as you sort of see on their daily, we've got this really strong sort of uptrend sort of coming through here. We are hitting a sort of little bit of a sort of resistance zone here, as you can see, sort of back previously over this zone, and over here as well. It has been a bit of a sort of swing point, though it's hard to sort of really say. You don't want to stand in front of a sort of raging bull, and this is just coming up so hard. couple of things to sort of say that there might be a little bit of a breather is that the RSI is still tipping. I mean, it's pretty heavy in the sort of overbought section here. It is coming into this sort of point of resistance, and as you can sort of see, you know, it's starting to have a little bit of a thought about it, and that's instead of getting these nice big solid bullish candles, you're getting a bit of a sort of doji, and obviously doji sort of being a little bit of indecision. So given that, and also the fact that it's overbought, it's probably leaning a little bit more into the idea of taking a little bit of a breather. So we could be sort of looking at something sort of a bit of a pullback here, maybe down to the 23rd fib. I mean, it could go lower, but we'll get into that. But sort of come back to the 23rd, that'll give the time for the RSI to have a bit of a cool off, and then sort of have it sort of push through. But I would really say this sort of level here, around the sort of 74.50 to 74.80 zone. Obviously, that's where the bulls are driving for. So even once it sort of gets to this point here, I'd expect it then to sort of come back down here, possibly a little bit of playing around. But at the moment, the strength is definitely there, and it looks like it wants to go higher, boom, and then so on and so on. So that's what we're sort of looking at for the moment. But I think sort of you sort of zoom in on this as well, you're sort of seeing on the 4 hour. So you can sort of see these other little areas here. You got a little bit of sort of congestion, sort of, I mean, so you probably need to get in on the 1 hour and that, sort of see the sort of price sort of hesitating up and down, and also previous highs over this point here. This is all around the 23 fib line, and obviously that 23 fib lines are based over this whole sort of move off the lows. But I would sort of say that if it is going to sort of come back, if it is going to sort of pull back out of this little sort of consolidation sort of zone here, this is probably an area to start to look long again. So I'd be looking to put some buys in, probably around this zone here. So what are we at? 73.77. So I'd say around the zone here, you could probably be looking for buys. So anywhere in this sort of patch here. So we'll make that. Be looking for sort of buys, so a bit of a pullback here, and then sort of push forward through again. But I mean, it could sort of break out and break to the top side. I think above 74.40 will be the sort of confirmation that it wants to go higher. But there's a sort of bit of a loose sort of channel sort of coming along here. It's pushed out the top. It's really sort of tightened up over sort of Friday's session. So I would say probably more likely you're going to see maybe a bit of a fake out to the top side here, and then sort of really coming back down. So we're going to be looking for some sort of USD strength early in the week, a bit of more of a sort of risk off kind of attitude, and then again, as I said, they're looking to get long probably around this 23 fib line, which, as I said, sort of lines up with a couple of these other areas where sort of people obviously were sort of thinking about price a little bit, and you know, you're starting to get some sort of sellers coming in around here. So now we've sort of gone through the top side. Structurally, it'd look good to sort of come back, retest this on the lows, and then sort of be pushing back up to the highs there.